The deep space exploration vessel, Horizon, drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its hull reflecting the distant starlight. Inside, Jack Stone stood at the observation deck, his broad shoulders tense as he watched the unfamiliar star patterns. After 15 years in Earth's special forces, he thought space exploration would be peaceful. He was wrong. The first warning came from the ship's sensors. 3 massive objects appeared from nowhere, their dark shapes blocking out the stars. They were warships, but unlike anything humans had ever built. Jack's military training kicked in immediately. Battle stations. He shouted into the ship's comm system, but it was too late. Before the crew could react, a strange purple beam hit their ship. All systems went dead. The alien ships were elegant but terrifying, their hulls covered in what looked like living metal. They dwarfed the Horizon, making it look like a tiny fish next to whales. As the ships drew closer, Jack could see strange markings on their sides, glowing with an inner light. Through the observation window, Jack watched as smaller craft emerged from the larger ships. They looked like metal insects, their movements quick and precise. He had faced many dangers on Earth, but this was different. This was an enemy he knew nothing about. The ship's emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the corridors as Jack ran to the weapons locker. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallways. Most of the crew had already been taken. He could hear strange sounds coming from the lower decks, like metal scraping against metal. When the aliens finally reached the observation deck, Jack was ready. He stood with his back against the wall, holding the ship's last working laser rifle. The door hissed open, and he got his first look at them. They were massive, at least 8 feet tall, with gray-blue skin that looked as tough as armor. Their 4 eyes glowed yellow in the dim light, and their movements were incredibly fast despite their size. Jack fired the rifle, but the laser beam bounced off their skin like it was nothing. The fight was brief but fierce. Jack managed to knock one alien down using his combat training, but there were too many. They seemed surprised by his resistance. Clearly, they weren't used to prey that fought back. Their strength was overwhelming. Each blow felt like being hit by a truck. As they dragged him through their ship, Jack stayed alert, memorizing every detail. The corridors were huge, designed for beings much larger than humans. The air smelled strange, like ozone and something metallic. Other aliens stopped to stare at him, their expressions unreadable on their alien faces. They brought him to what looked like a throne room. It was massive, with ceilings so high it disappeared into shadows. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing with the same purple light that had disabled his ship. And there, sitting on a throne that seemed to be made of living metal, was their king. King Razak was even larger than the others, his skin darker and marked with what looked like battle scars. He wore armor that seemed to shift colors in the light, and his eyes glowed with an intelligence that made Jack's spine tingle. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly clear, translated by some unseen technology. "So this is what humans look like up close," the king said, leaning forward. "Such small, soft creatures, yet you fought my warriors. Interesting." He stood up, towering over everyone. "You will fight in our arena. If you prove entertaining enough, you might live longer than the others." Jack said nothing, but his mind was already working. These aliens were stronger, bigger, and had better technology. But they were arrogant. They underestimated humans. And in his experience, that was always a fatal mistake. As they led him away to the holding cells, Jack caught a glimpse of their destination through a massive window. A planet unlike any he had seen before, with purple oceans and 3 moons. Somewhere down there was their arena. And that's where he would show them exactly what humans were capable of. The holding cell was dark and cold, but Jack wasn't alone. Other aliens filled nearby cells, each different from the last. Some had scales, others had fur, but all of them looked beaten and tired. Through the energy barrier of his cell, Jack could hear the distant roar of a crowd. A guard walked past, bigger than the others Jack had seen. Its heavy footsteps made the metal floor shake. "Human," it growled. "Your turn soon." The translation device in Jack's ear, implanted shortly after his capture, made the words clear but couldn't hide the mockery in the guard's voice. They came for him at what felt like dawn, though it was hard to tell time in the underground cells. 2 guards led him through twisting corridors, their walls covered in moving patterns of light. Other prisoners pressed against their barriers to watch. Some made gestures that might have been wishes of good luck. The preparation room was vast, with weapons covering every wall. But these weren't the advanced weapons Jack expected. Instead, he saw spears, swords, shields, and other ancient-looking tools of war. A small alien with 6 arms approached him, carrying what looked like armor. "Choose carefully," the small alien said, its voice high and quick. "The weapons you pick might save your life, or end it faster." It started fitting pieces of light armor onto Jack's body. The nobles bet on these fights. They sponsor warriors. Win enough, and you might catch a noble's eye. Jack studied the weapons while the alien worked. Everything looked primitive, but he noticed the materials were unlike anything on Earth. The metals had a strange sheen, and even the wooden weapons seemed to pulse with inner strength. "Why such basic weapons?" Jack asked, picking up a sword that felt perfectly balanced in his hand. "Your people have spaceships." The small alien laughed, a chirping sound. "Cain Razak believes true warriors need no technology. The arena is about skill, strength, and courage. Besides," it added, "the nobles find it more entertaining this way." Before Jack could ask more questions, a deep horn sounded. The small alien stepped back quickly. "Remember," it said, "first blood or surrender ends the match. Unless it's a death match. Then," it made a cutting motion across its throat. The arena entrance opened slowly, revealing a circular battlefield larger than any stadium Jack had seen on Earth. The ground was covered in different terrains: sand, rock, even small pools of water. Above, force fields kept the cheering crowd safe from what happened below. King Razak sat in a massive booth overlooking everything. Around him, nobles in elaborate armor watched through devices that looked like floating crystals. Jack realized they were recording and analyzing every movement. His opponent entered from the other side. It was one of the gray-skinned aliens, but smaller than most Jack had seen. A beginner's match then. The alien carried a spear and moved with obvious training. The crowd cheered louder. "Today's match," a voice boomed, "sponsored by Noble Lord Thex, his new acquisition, a human warrior, faces champion trainee Cull. Place your bets." Jack gripped his sword tighter, remembering his combat training. The alien was stronger, but Jack had fought stronger opponents before. It wasn't about power. It was about using your enemy's strength against them. The horn sounded again. Cole charged forward, spear aimed at Jack's chest. The crowd roared, expecting a quick end. But Jack had been watching how these aliens moved. They were fast and strong, but also predictable. At the last moment, Jack stepped aside. The spear thrust past him, and he grabbed it, using Cull's momentum to pull the alien forward. As Cull stumbled, Jack struck with his sword, not to kill, but to draw blood from the arm. The horn sounded again. First blood. The arena fell silent. Then, from the nobles section, excited whispers began. They hadn't expected this. Jack looked up at King Razak and saw the alien ruler leaning forward, all 4 eyes fixed on him with intense interest. The small alien was waiting when Jack returned to the preparation room. "Impressive," it said, removing his armor. "But be careful. You've drawn attention. In the arena, attention means harder fights." Jack smiled slightly. That was exactly what he wanted. The more they underestimated him, the better his chances of survival. And maybe, just maybe, of escape. 3 months had passed since Jack's first victory. His cell was now larger, with a window overlooking the arena where he had won 12 matches. Below, workers prepared the grounds for today's fights. But this fight would be different. Jack was facing his first death match. The small alien armorer, who Jack now knew was called Pip, hurried into his cell carrying new armor. This set was better than the old ones, made of the same shifting metal as the king's throne. A gift from Lord Thex, Pip said, helping Jack put it on. He's tripled his bets on you today. Jack had learned much about his opponents. The gray-skinned aliens, who called themselves the First Race, had a weakness. They couldn't bend sideways quickly. Their tough skin made them overconfident. And most importantly, they tired faster than humans in long fights. Your opponent today is Big Crag, Pip said, voice shaking slightly. He's killed 23 fighters, never lost a match. The small alien adjusted Jack's armor straps. He likes to play with his food before eating it. The arena horn sounded, deeper than usual for death matches. Jack walked through the now familiar corridors, other fighters pressing against their barriers to watch. He had become something of a legend among the prisoners, the small human who kept winning. The crowd was larger today. Death matches always drew bigger audiences. Noble lords and ladies sat in their floating platforms, their betting crystals glowing brightly. King Rezak watched from his booth, all four eyes focused on the arena. Big Crag entered from the opposite side. He was massive, nearly twice the size of regular warriors, with dark gray skin covered in battle scars. He carried a huge warhammer that most fighters couldn't even lift. The crowd chanted his name. Today's death match, the announcer boomed, brings us the undefeated champion Big Crag against the surprising human warrior. Lord Thex has wagered half his fortune on the human's victory. Let the match begin. Crag didn't charge immediately like others did. He walked forward slowly, swinging his hammer in lazy circles. Little human, his voice rumbled across the arena. I will break every bone in your body. Slowly, Jack held his sword ready, moving in a circle. He had chosen a lighter blade today. Speed would matter more than power. The crowd grew quiet, sensing this wouldn't be a quick fight. The first hammer swing came fast, smashing into the ground where Jack had stood a moment before. But Jack was already moving, ducking under the weapon. His sword flashed out, cutting across Crag's leg. First blood, but this wasn't a normal match. The fight would continue until one of them died. Crag roared and attacked again and again. Each strike could have killed Jack instantly, but none connected. Jack kept moving, making small cuts, wearing the bigger fighter down. The crowd watched in amazement as minutes turned to hours. Finally, Crag began to slow. His mighty swings became sluggish. Sweat poured down his gray skin. But still he fought, pride not letting him understand that he was losing to a human. Stand still and die. Crag bellowed, raising his hammer for one final attack. It was the moment Jack had waited for. As the hammer came down, Jack stepped inside Crag's guard. His sword struck upward, finding the weak spot under the alien's arm that he had noticed in previous fights. The hammer fell from lifeless hands. Big Crag, the undefeated champion, collapsed to the arena floor. Dead silence filled the stadium. Then the cheering began. It started with the prisoners, then spread to the common crowds, and finally even some nobles joined in. Jack stood tired but victorious, his sword dripping alien blood onto the arena sand. In his booth, Cain Razak stood up, all four eyes blazing with intense interest. This human had done more than win a fight. He had changed everything the First Race thought they knew about combat. And that made him very dangerous indeed. As guards led him back to his cell, Jack caught fragments of excited conversations. The nobles were already planning bigger matches, greater challenges. But Jack didn't care about their plans. Every fight was another chance to study his captors, another step toward eventual freedom. Jack sat in his new quarters, much nicer than his old cell, studying a hologram of past arena battles. After defeating Big Crag, he had won 10 more matches. Now other fighters avoided eye contact when he walked past. The nobles called him the human champion. A commotion outside his door made him look up. Guards rushed in, their armor gleaming. Behind them came a sight Jack hadn't expected: King Razak himself, ducking to enter through the doorway. "Leave us," the king commanded. The guards hesitated, then backed out. Jack stood, noting how the king's battle-scarred armor seemed to shift colors in the light. "You've caused quite a stir in my empire, human," Razak said, his 4 eyes studying Jack carefully. "Some nobles have lost fortunes betting against you. Others have gained even more betting for you." The king walked to the window overlooking the arena. "But money doesn't interest me. Power does." Jack stayed silent, watching. The king was nearly twice his size, but moved with surprising grace for such a large being. "Your fighting style," Razak continued, "it's unlike anything we've seen. You don't rely on strength. You watch, you wait, you think." He turned back to Jack. "I want to understand how you do it. I could teach you," Jack offered carefully, "in exchange for my freedom." The king's laughter echoed off the walls. "Teach us." "No, human, I have a better idea." His eyes gleamed. "You will face my personal guard, all 12 of them, one after another." Jack's heart raced, but he kept his face calm. The king's guard were legendary warriors, each one a champion before joining the royal service. "If you win," Razak said, "you earn your freedom. If you lose," he made a slashing gesture, "but you won't have to face them all at once. Each fight will be separate. One guard, one fight, until you either defeat them all or die trying." It was clearly a trap, but Jack saw opportunity. The king's guards would be his toughest challenge yet, but also a chance to learn more about the empire's best warriors. "And if I win," he asked, "you'll keep your word." "I am king," Razak said proudly. "My word is law." He moved closer, looming over Jack. "But understand this, no one has ever defeated my entire guard. Not even in separate fights." "When do we start?" Jack asked, meeting the king's gaze. "Tomorrow. The whole empire will watch." Razak turned to leave, then paused. "Tell me, human, what makes your kind so different? Why do you keep winning when stronger warriors fail?" Jack thought for a moment. "Humans learned long ago that being the strongest doesn't mean you'll survive. It's about adapting, learning, and never giving up." The king stared at him for a long moment. "Interesting," he finally said. "Perhaps tomorrow will teach us both something new." He left, his guards falling in behind him. As soon as they were gone, Pip slipped into the room. "Are you crazy?" the small alien squeaked. "The king's guards are the deadliest warriors in the empire. Each one could have killed Big Crag." "Tell me about them," Jack said, turning back to his battle holograms. "Every detail you know." Pip spoke rapidly, describing each guard's fighting style and preferred weapons. Jack listened carefully, already forming plans. He would need every advantage tomorrow. That night, as he prepared his weapons and armor, Jack thought about Earth, about freedom. The king had given him this challenge expecting him to fail. But humans had a long history of doing the impossible. From his window, he could see the arena being prepared for tomorrow's spectacle. Thousands would come to watch. The nobles would bet fortunes. And somewhere in the empire, others like him were waiting in cells, hoping for a chance at freedom. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. The arena looked different today. Workers had spent all night preparing it, adding new obstacles and different terrain types. The usual sand was now mixed with rocky areas, shallow water pools, and even some raised platforms. The morning sun cast everything in a purple light through the planet's strange atmosphere. Jack stood in the preparation room, checking his weapons one last time. He had chosen carefully: a medium sword, a small shield, and a backup dagger. Pip helped him with his armor, the small alien's hands shaking. "The first guard is Iceheart," Pip whispered. "She earned her name because she never shows mercy." never loses her calm. The small alien adjusted Jack's shoulder plate. She fights with twin blades and moves like water. Above, the crowd was larger than Jack had ever seen. Every noble in the Empire had come to watch. Their floating platforms filled the air, crystals glowing as massive bets were placed. Cain Razak sat in his booth, wearing his full battle regalia. Today, the announcer's voice boomed, "We witness history. The human champion faces the 12 royal guards. First to enter the arena, Iceheart, first blade of the royal guard." She entered like a ghost, her armor a pale blue that seemed to shimmer. 2 curved swords hung at her sides. Unlike other warriors Jack had faced, she didn't showboat for the crowd. Her 4 eyes fixed on him with deadly focus. "Begin." The horn sounded. Iceheart drew her blades in one smooth motion. She moved like nothing Jack had seen before, her feet barely touching the ground. Her first attack came from 3 directions at once, both swords and a kick aimed at different targets. Jack blocked one blade with his shield, dodged the second, and took the kick to his armored leg. The impact was like being hit by a car, but he kept his balance. The crowd gasped. Most fighters fell to that opening move. "Interesting," Iceheart said, her voice cool and calculating. "You saw the kick coming." She attacked again, her blades leaving light trails in the air. Jack gave ground, moving toward the rocky area. He had studied her previous fights. She preferred open spaces where she could use her speed. Among the rocks, her movements would be more limited. The fight became a deadly dance. Iceheart's blades struck again and again, but Jack's shield caught most blows. When he counterattacked, she flowed around his sword like smoke. Minutes passed. The crowd grew quiet, watching the tactical battle unfold. Finally, Jack saw his chance. Iceheart had developed a pattern. 3 quick attacks followed by a half-step back. He waited for the 3rd strike, then did something unexpected. Instead of backing away, he stepped forward. The move caught her off guard. His shield slammed into her chest, while his sword swept her legs. For the first time ever, Iceheart fell. Before she could recover, Jack's blade rested at her throat. Silence filled the arena. Iceheart lay still for a moment, then nodded once. "I yield," she said, her voice still calm. "Well fought, human. The others won't underestimate you now." The crowd erupted in cheers and shouts. Nobles argued loudly about their bets. In his booth, King Razak leaned forward, all 4 eyes glowing with interest. As guards helped Iceheart up, she turned to Jack. "You saw my pattern. No one has ever." She paused. "The others will be harder, especially the 3rd guard. He fights with rage, not technique." Jack nodded his thanks for the warning. 1 down, 11 to go. He was already tired, and this had been one of the easier fights. But as he looked up at the amazed crowd, he saw something new in their eyes. Respect. Pip rushed out with water and fresh armor parts. That was amazing. But the next one. The small alien looked scared. "The 2nd guard uses a weapon you've never seen before." The horn sounded again, cutting off Pip's warning. It was time for the next fight. Jack gripped his sword tighter, ready to face whatever came next. 6 hours had passed. The arena floor was scared with battle marks. 5 royal guards had yielded, 4 had been knocked unconscious, and 2 had been carried away with serious injuries. Jack stood bleeding from several wounds, his armor dented and cracked. Only 1 guard remained. Final battle. The announcer's voice shook with excitement. "The human champion faces Thunder Fist, first of the Royal Guard." The crowd roared louder than ever. Many had lost fortunes today. Others had gained even more. But now, everyone watched to see if a human could do the impossible. Thunder Fist entered the arena. He was bigger than any warrior Jack had faced, even larger than Big Crag. His armor was deep black with lightning patterns that actually crackled with energy. In his hands, he held a massive war hammer that glowed with power. "Brave human," Thunderfist's voice rolled like distant thunder. "You have earned the right to die quickly. I will make it painless." Jack could barely lift his sword. His shield arm hung limp, nearly broken from the last fight. Pip had begged him to yield, but Jack refused. He had come too far to give up now. "The human is dead on his feet," someone shouted from the crowd. "Thunderfist will crush him." But King Razak raised his hand for silence. "Let them fight," he commanded. "The human has surprised us 11 times today. Let us see if he can do it once more." The horn sounded. Thunderfist charged forward, his hammer trailing lightning. The ground shook with each step. Jack tried to dodge, but his tired legs wouldn't move fast enough. The hammer caught his shield, shattering it completely and sending him flying. "Stay down," Thunderfist warned. "You have fought well. There is no shame in yielding now." Jack spat blood and stood up. He remembered his training instructor's words. "When you're too tired to fight, when every muscle screams to stop, that's when you find out what you're really made of." Thunderfist attacked again. This time Jack didn't try to dodge. Instead, he stepped into the attack. The crowd gasped. It looked like suicide. But at the last moment, Jack dropped and rolled under the hammer's swing. His sword flashed up, cutting deep into Thunderfist's arm. The giant warrior bellowed in pain and surprise. His next attacks were wilder, fueled by rage. Lightning crackled everywhere as his hammer smashed the arena floor again and again. But Jack kept moving, ignoring his body's pain, striking small cuts whenever he could. Minutes passed like hours. Thunderfist began to slow, his mighty swings taking more effort. Jack's strategy was working, the same one that had won him every fight. Wear them down, wait for mistakes, strike at weak points. Finally, Thunderfist raised his hammer for one massive attack. Lightning gathered around the weapon, lighting up the arena like day. The crowd held their breath. This blow would surely end the fight, but they had never seen a human's determination. As the hammer fell, Jack used his last burst of strength to leap forward. His sword dropped from numb fingers, but he grabbed Thunderfist's armor instead. Using the giant's own momentum, Jack pulled and twisted. Thunderfist, caught off balance, stumbled forward. His hammer missed Jack by inches and struck the ground with devastating force. The impact threw both fighters into the air. When the lightning cleared, both lay motionless on the ground. Slowly, painfully, Jack stood up. Thunderfist tried to rise but fell back, his balance destroyed by Jack's last move. Their eyes met. After a long moment, Thunderfist nodded. "I yield," he said, his voice filled with disbelief and respect. The arena exploded with sound. The impossible had happened. A human had defeated all 12 royal guards. King Razak stood in his booth, all 4 eyes blazing with an emotion no one could read. The last thing Jack saw before darkness took him was Pip running toward him, shouting something about making history. Jack woke up 3 days later in a room he didn't recognize. The walls were made of that strange shifting metal, and through a large window, he could see the planet's 3 moons. His wounds had been treated with advanced medical technology, far better than anything he'd seen in the arena. Pip sat nearby, practically jumping with excitement when Jack opened his eyes. "You did it. You really did it. No one has ever beaten all 12 guards. The whole empire is talking about nothing else." Before Jack could respond, the door opened. King Razak entered, but this time without guards. He looked different, more thoughtful, less arrogant. He carried something wrapped in shimmering cloth. "The human champion awakens," Razak said, his voice surprisingly quiet. "You have changed things, warrior, changed them in ways I never expected." Jack tried to sit up. His body felt better, but still ached from the battles. "A deal is a deal," he said. "I won my freedom." The king nodded slowly. "Yes, you did. But before you decide to leave, hear my offer." He unwrapped the cloth package, revealing a piece of armor unlike anything Jack had seen. It seemed to be made of pure energy given solid form. "This is the armor of the king's advisor," Razak explained. "No human has ever worn it, but you have shown us something we needed to learn." He placed the armor on a nearby table. "Our empire has grown weak with pride. We believed strength was everything. You proved us wrong." Jack looked at the armor, then back at the king. "What exactly are you offering?" "Stay," Razak said. "Become my military advisor. Teach our warriors what you know about strategy, about using an enemy's strength against them. Help us become better than we are." The king's 4 eyes glowed with sincerity. "Your freedom is yours, regardless of your choice. But you could help build something new here." Pip squeaked with excitement. "Oh, please stay. You could change everything. Make things better for all the fighters." Jack thought about Earth, about home. But he also thought about all the other prisoners in the arena, about how the Empire treated those it saw as weak. Maybe he could change things from the inside. "If I stay," Jack said carefully, "the arena system changes. No more death matches. No more keeping fighters in cells. They train as warriors, not slaves." The king was quiet for a long moment. "You dare to make demands of me?" "I do." Jack met the king's gaze steadily. "Because you know I'm right. The Empire can be stronger without being cruel." Suddenly, the king laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "And that is exactly why I want you as advisor. You never stop fighting, even from a hospital bed." He extended his massive hand. "Do we have a deal?" Jack took the king's hand, noting how the gesture surprised even Pip. Equals making a deal, not a king commanding a subject. "We have a deal," Jack said. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow," Razak answered. "I have already ordered changes to the arena. The nobles are unhappy, but they saw what you did. No one can deny the power of your methods now." As the king turned to leave, he paused. "One more thing. The human ship we captured. Your people will want to know what happened to you. I think, perhaps it's time our empire made official contact with Earth." After Razak left, Pip bounded over to Jack's bed. "You're going to change everything. And I get to help. I've already started designing new training programs and—" Jack smiled as Pip chattered on. He thought about how far he'd come from that first fight. Sometimes, the greatest victories came not from destroying your enemies, but from showing them a better way. Outside his window, the 3 moons rose over the alien world that was now his home. Not as a prisoner or a gladiator, but as someone who could make a difference. It wasn't the ending he'd expected, but maybe it was the one this empire needed.